Let's go over the environment variables and settings necessary for compiling with Gamebryo. Most of these things should be set up for you automatically during the various install processes, but if, say, a Microsoft library isn't properly registered with your operating system, you'll want to have some idea what's wrong and how to debug it. So if I use run cmd to bring up a command window, I can check environment variables easily. Set EGB lists all of the emergent Gamebryo environment variables. And here I can check that, yes, this has been correctly installed. EGB path is the route to the base of my Gamebryo installation. The shader library path and the tool plugin path point out particular paths inside that installation that will be referenced later. Here, everything seems to be correct. Now, to compile inside Visual Studio, lots of things need to be set up. One note is that Gamebryo only supports the full version of Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Express. I'll be looking at Visual Studio 2005 today. 2008 is much the same. In order to compile with Gamebryo, you'll need to have the March 2008 DirectX SDK and the March 2006 Microsoft Platform SDK. These should have their include and library paths set up in Visual Studio before the default Visual Studio include and library paths. So if I go to Tools, Options, VC++ Directories, and check Show Directories for Include Files, here the DirectX SDK and the Platform SDK are listed before any Visual Studio default directories. Similarly, if I check Library Files, the two Microsoft updates are included before any of the default older library directories that came with Visual Studio. If you don't have those files in there, you can get bad header versions or bad library versions, or just complete failure to link. Now, in order to get your code compiling with Gamebryo specifically, you need to tell Visual Studio where to set the include directories, where to set the link or directories, what libraries to link with. So for include directories, if we check the project's properties, you want to make sure that the configuration properties for C, C++ lists additional include directories of exactly what's here: EGB path, SDK, Win32, include. Remember that in the previous step, we used set EGB to check in the command window that EGB path was correctly set. This will go then to the root of our installation of Gamebryo and look for the include path. Similarly, we need to make sure Visual Studio knows which libraries to link with and where to find them. Second part first. In the same property page, the linker section has a general subsection which lets you specify additional library directories. Here, EGB path, SDK, Win32, lib, VC80 for Visual Studio 2005, and then a final directory based on what sort of build configuration you're using. We'll talk about the build configurations after we've gone through all the parameters. Which libraries to link with? The next subsection of this property page lets you list additional dependencies. What's necessary for every Gamebryo application is NISystem, NIFloodgate, NIMain, NIMesh, and a renderer, either NIDX9renderer.lib or NID3D10renderer.lib. Now, you may look at this list of libraries and say, no renderer is there. That's because NIAnimation uses pragma directives inside the C++ code to force linking with an appropriate renderer. You can do that too if you want. The rest of these are application-dependent libraries. Now, some of these things are not obviously set in every single Gamebryo application because Gamebryo also uses Visual Studio property sheets. If you go to the Solution Explorer in Visual Studio and click on the Property Manager tab, you can see which configurations exist for each project and what properties they're inheriting from standard Gamebryo property sheets. You can find these inside EGB path, inside the Gamebryo installation, in the build directory. Now, finally, what are those build configurations? Every Gamebryo application can be built several different ways. For instance, the standard material demo comes in debug, release, or shipping variants. The Gamebryo documentation has a Gamebryo build configurations page that lists the configurations for each hardware platform. So for PCs, we have debug, release, and shipping modes with both statically linked and dynamically linked libraries. Debug mode doesn't have any optimization and has full logging. Release mode has optimization turned on, but also has full logging. Finally, shipping mode has optimization and no logging at all.